episode 162 of Silver Lining for Learning. I'm Chris Dede from Harvard University. With me is Yang Zhao from the University of Kansas and Melbourne University, and Kurt Bonk from Indiana University, co-hosts. And our program today is about engineering learning. Now, this is a topic near and dear to my own heart. I co-edited a book about it in 2019. I've been to all 4 of the engineering learning conferences that have been held. Saw Danielle at one of those a couple weeks ago. And I just think that it's a really important field. We had an episode on engineering learning a few months ago with 3 of the major figures in the field. And now we have another episode with another 3 of the major figures in the field. So I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about why you're excited about this topic, and then we'll start a conversation about it. So, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to be here. Great to talk about our favorite topic, learning engineering. So I'm Danielle McNamara. I'm at Arizona State University, and we are launching the Learning Engineering Institute at Arizona State University. We're very excited about that. I've been doing research in educational technologies for a good almost 30 years. Developing tutoring systems and systems for natural language processing, both to support learners as well as researchers. And now we are turning our attention to focusing on applying learning engineering principles to enhancing student outcomes, first at Arizona State University, and then of course, across the world. What we've been doing for the last few years is developing the data infrastructure for that, called Learning at Scale. So one of the foundational principles of learning engineering is having data so that you can be informed on what matters. And so we've been working to provide the infrastructure so researchers can access data about students. And so we think that this is going to be foundational in informing how students learn and what they need. And then the Learning Engineering Institute is going to provide the support so we can do those studies. And Rod and Scotty are my co-directors in this endeavor.
Please jump in.
We're happy to join you. I was about to say, yeah, would you like to just jump in? Okay. Yeah, and we're happy to join you with that, Danielle. I was very excited to be asked. I don't know, Rod, if you want to talk or if you want me to talk, but I started, so I'll keep going. Thank you to all of the audience actually for joining us this morning. I'm Dr. Scotty Craig, Arizona State University. And the co-director, as Danielle said, for the Learning Engineering Institute. My specific focus, as far as I am the director for research and evaluation. My background, again, similar to Danielle, I've been doing research around learning engineering for years, calling it different things. My training, I'm a cognitive psychologist who focused on learning, primarily looking at human learning and how we can actually use what we know about how humans think and make decisions and process information to support that learning process. And I've done that primarily with technology. And I've done a lot of worked on lots of systems over the years. My background is actually from the University of Memphis. So if any of you have heard about the older auto tutor system from Memphis, actually I was there from the beginning. So it's really exciting to do a lot of research there. However, the main areas that I'm known for, I guess, would be looking at emotions and learning, multimedia learning, especially as opposed to how people learn specifically with videos as multimedia. and how we can incorporate things such as virtual humans into that and use virtual humans to support learning. Basically, as a stand-in for when you can't have an actual human there. And I've done a lot of research and evaluation around that. And that's kind of what brought me into the learning engineering area, and how I originally found out about it was because I was also the director for the Advanced Distributed Learning Partnership Lab here at ASU. One of 3 partnership labs, which we were partnering with the US Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative and a lot of our NATO partners to improve online learning within primarily military and also federal government settings. And that's where I first found out about learning engineering. And I was like, yes, this is it. This is actually the word that I've actually been in the group that I've been looking for my entire life, my entire career. And I was very excited to find them. And they're an amazing group of people. So if you are thinking about wanting to know more about learning engineering, get involved with the society, Icicle. Come to the conference. It's actually going to be in Phoenix next year. It's very exciting. And everybody wants to come to Phoenix in July. It's going to be fun and 115 degrees. But whatever, we'll deal with it. It'll be great and exciting and fun. So now with that, I'll turn it over to Rod.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I am Rod Roscoe. I'm also faculty at ASU in human systems engineering. So think about human-computer interaction, human factors, user-centered design, all of those things that are great ingredients for learning engineering. My background is also in psychology with a focus on learning. So I'm just really interested in the process, like how people learn, particularly like self-regulated learning. So how do we do these things like, on our own with support? And over time, I've incorporated more technology in that work. So how can technology support learners, enable learners, create new opportunities, and all those sorts of good things. And I've worked on a variety of systems, many of them with Danielle. I've been a colleague of Danielle for quite some time now. And I mean, I just think that the potential for technology is so great if we're smart about it. So like I said, my background is psychology, but one of the things that I like about learning engineering is that it's so multi-trans interdisciplinary. That really jives with the way I've approached my research, which is, that's a cool idea. I'm going to claim it now. So like computer science, psychological science, learning science, what I call design science, and also equity science or inclusion science. So understanding those things. So I really appreciate that our team, but also the field in general, is so collaborative in bringing together all these different disciplines to study and address these ideas. And in the Learning Engineering Institute, my role will be as the Director of Inclusive Excellence. I think that's our current working title. So I'm really there to make sure that this idea of inclusion, the ASU charter, which we should probably read out loud, is really embedded in everything we do. So the way we work with each other, the way our teams operate, the questions we ask, and then also, of course, the outcomes that we produce. So thinking about the way that informs our data, the way we collect it, the way we analyze it, who we are serving and how we are serving. I think all of those are really important at this moment in time to think about learning engineering. And so I'm really happy to not only be doing ed tech and research, but sort of making sure we are also doing it inclusively for all learners, regardless of their background or their journeys.
So Herb Simon coined the term learning engineering over half a century ago, which shows something about the pace in higher education, that it's taken half a century to really get some momentum behind this, despite the fact that it's a great idea. But it is a confusing term when people first hear it, because they think that you're learning engineering. And it is kind of contested territory. So some people in the learning sciences say, well, this is just repackaging the learning sciences. Other people say, well, it's just repackaging instructional design. It's just repackaging human-centered design. It's just repackaging personalization, and so on and so on. But those of us who work in the field believe that it's unique. And I think you've collectively spoken to some of that it's all of those things. And because it is all of those things, it's a border crossing in a very productive way. But I wonder if you can give an example of learning engineering in action that would help people see that whatever was produced would be less if only one of those lenses, the fields that claim it's just them, were applied. Anyone have an example you care to discuss?
Well, everybody else is going to be silent. I'll jump in. So one example that I can give of a really good learning engineering project that I've worked on, and this is actually with the ADL, Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative, DoD. So they created this system called PEARLS, which is the Pervasive Learning System. That's why pervasive sounds a little bit scary. That's why we always call it PEARLS. So we actually created the system, but the system itself is to help to monitor and support learners' self-regulated learning in a mobile micro-learning based content. But in order to do that, we first had to build a very interdisciplinary team. So we had our challenge. We knew that we wanted to build the system. We knew we wanted to have it so that it could support self-regulated learning, that it could be implemented and widely used across the entire ecosystem, military type ecosystem. So what we started to first reform the team. And that's actually very important in the learning engineering process. So we had software engineering, we had developers, we had front-end designers. They actually all came through a partnership through Float Incorporated, who was the primary developers. We had data scientists from ADL working on in the background on the data. And from my team from ASU, we brought in usability, human-centered design, evaluation, and experimental evaluation. So we were able to take the system from the development stage where we looked at it and we conducted a learning strategy analysis to see, do these, what's being done actually implement and support student learning, to human-centered evaluations while they iteratively designed. Then after that, we moved on to looking at who are the primary users, what barriers might they have for the system. And in all these cases, we were able to make recommendations in an iterative, quick process back to the developer team, which is Float, and work directly with them to implement that to make a better system. And we kept going, especially with them, the usability, until the system itself basically was green on all settings. It was ready to go on our summative settings, summative evaluations and formative evaluations. Then we implemented it to make sure that it actually worked in the field and conducted a randomized trial. And all of these is one very large-scale project. It's about a 3-year project. And just so you know, it was effective. It significantly increased learning. It helped to improve the learner's understanding of self-regulation, their ability to actually self-regulate, and it decreased the amount of dropout in the class. So more people actually made it through by the end. And those are the type of data you want for those final types of evaluations. Okay, so there you go. And there's actually many wonderful papers, several wonderful papers on that. If you want to look at them, I'm happy to give them to you. Maybe we can release them with the podcast. And anybody else? So I know I kind of jumped in there, but
I could highlight some of the aspects of what you were talking about. It's, when you talk about the difference between design-based research or the difference with learning sciences, the difference with educational technology research. I think the things that Scotty is pointing out is the package, and that learning engineering is first centered on a problem or an objective, something that you want to solve. Whereas learning sciences, quite valuable, is usually focused on a theory, usually focused on better understanding or exploring a space and better understanding how learning works, so to speak. And the center is very important. And then the other very critical part is the instrumentation. So making sure that you have access to data from the very start, that you're thinking about assessment, that you're thinking about evaluation, that you are planning ahead on what data that you will need. The third thing I think is very critical is this team concept. Part of that team concept is the human-centered design. So thinking about involving everyone from the start, from different vantage points. And then the fourth part is this iterative cycle, and iterating through and working through different phases of the project. And, I had this conversation yesterday with someone who is starting a project in the Learning Engineering Institute. And we have this concept called Learning Engineering Action Pods. So I personally think that's quite clever because I thought of it. And it's these groups, leaps, that come together and solve problems. And so this individual is forming a leap to begin investigation of the potential benefits of an app that would be provided to ASU students. And what I discovered is the researcher planned on taking a very traditional approach. And that was, in the fall, implement a small study using the site pool to investigate the feasibility and usability of the app. In the spring, approach an instructor. Go to the instructor and say, can we use this app in your course? Next year, start integrating it with ASU infrastructure after we have all of these data, some evidence. That's a very traditional iterative approach. Whereas what I said is, no, don't go into this instructor's course after we've already designed the parts of it. Involve the instructor in the process, involve students in the process. Start the instrumentation now, begin working with ASU, educational enterprise technologies, bring people into the process, form a team, form a leap, start this iterative process from multiple directions, multiple vantage points now, not iteratively. And so I think that those components really help to understand why learning engineering is different than all of the other disciplines that have led to our better understanding the process of learning engineering.
Thank you. So this will go back to what Chris was really asking again, is learning engineering is very contested. It is debatable. You also referenced the learning sciences. Chris and I were chatting about learning sciences with Roger Schenck. And so I'm just really. By the way, Chris told me Roger Schenck just passed away, but that's another story. So I've been, I went to grad school with Punya, so we are kind of about the same age. We've been doing this for a long time. And there's always a need to create a new term for something. There is a need, like, when you build the Institute for Learning Engineering at ASU, I bet you might be the first one. Everybody loves it for now, right? So I was just, this has nothing to do with what you're doing, because you guys, especially Scotty, you look very excited about this learning science and learning engineering thing. You're very excited, and the example you gave just now, did not really necessarily convince me you need learning engineering to capture that. You did not use it, you could do it as a project. I'm sure you guys are all smart people. You're doing this thing. So I'm really just interested in both Danielle and Scotty and Rod, really your response to the idea. There's nothing wrong with you guys running the Institute. You can call it whatever, but really taking learning engineering, move it towards a discipline. And if you had a philosophy of science, if you think about it, what's the philosophy of science and what's the philosophy of engineering? What makes your learning, what's the philosophy of engineering under the Learning Engineering Institute? It's very important. In science, we talk about falsifiability. That's important, right? That's kind of data, but in engineering, what would it be? What is so different? And so when you have this institute, do you think University of Arizona will pick up and run another learning engineering institute on their campus, and gradually in 5 years, learning engineering will be a discipline in 100 universities, something like that? I would just wonder about yoga, what you are thinking about this.
I'm willing to jump in on that and just pretty much strongly disagree. I think the way that you're talking about it, that you need a philosophy of science, really reminds me of the learning sciences. Like you need to pick your theory. You need to have your philosophy. And to me, the essence of learning engineering is to be open-minded to multiple theories of linguistics, theories of computer science, theories of human factors, theories of I could just keep going, cognitive science, cognition, learning sciences from this vantage point or that vantage point. One of the things that I think rings true is there's really no such thing. There probably is, but there's not a learning engineer. There's a learning engineering process. And our objective is to implement that process and teach students how to engage in that process. And then I would say, yes, I do think that it will become a discipline, but not quite in the flavor that you were talking about. Not quite in the flavor. That's why the term engineering is so important, that it is a discipline that describes the process of basically how to put this all together so that you can solve problems. I don't know if that answered my question, but I'm counting on Rod to riff on that.
I don't know if I'm the best person because, like, as I said, I'm just so, I don't know. I take a more an encompassing view. So I usually don't get too bogged down in terminology. Like, what exactly do we call it? I'm not going to fight anyone over learning science versus learning engineering versus, right, in 10 years there's going to be another phrase. But I do think what Danielle said is really important. It's the process. And I think for us, especially the process that really invites different perspectives. So maybe there's competing theoretical stances on the same team, and working through that tension is maybe where some solutions or innovations come from. Or just thinking about not necessarily competing viewpoints, but multiple viewpoints, so that someone on the team might be a sociologist or an anthropologist. Someone else on the team is a data analytics specialist. Someone else on the team is a curriculum and instruction person, students, different stakeholders, administrators. I think that's part of this process, as well as how can we have the biggest tent possible with people with as much agency and voices as possible, so that we really come with like this rich solution. Now, does learning engineering own that? I don't know. Again, I'm not going to fight anyone on that, but that's how I'm approaching it. And that's what's really exciting about what we're doing here, is that that approach, that process.
Kurt, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So I have a comment first, and then maybe the first question I have is not a question, more given Rod's recent response. And then I have a second follow-up question I can ask later on the show. So first, the comment. You know, it's kind of interesting, this term learning engineering, at least to me, because my father, he flunked out of engineering school at Marquette in Milwaukee, and then actually became an engineer at AT&T his whole life. I just skipped the first step and didn't even bother failing. I didn't even enroll in engineering because I knew I would flunk out myself. And I became an accountant instead, or CPA. But for Scotty's sake, I did go to cognitive science at Wisconsin, so I'm a cognitive psychologist as well. But as Chris alluded to, a few weeks ago, we had folks on from the UK and from the Netherlands who talked about learning experience design. And in fact, we had Niels Floor, who coined the word or phrase learning experience design. So my first question, and again, I might save the second one, but depending upon your answer here, my question is, how do you differentiate learning engineering from learning experience design, or is learning experience design an aspect, an important component or cog within learning engineering? And what do we need to think about in terms of learning experience design? And do you see now the field mandated or training in learning experience design? And are there opportunities for the young people who are listening to this podcast show or watching the video in YouTube? Are there opportunities, job-related opportunities, or other kinds of opportunities for them in this field, and what might those be?
We'll start with that response. Danielle and Rod may have something to add. And my response is that if you look at our book on human-centered learning engineering is human-centered in the learning engineering toolkit, we actually do explicitly say that learning experience design is an important cog. It's an important piece of the puzzle. It's actually one of those useful theories and ideas that we pull in to help ground us, to make sure that we are staying human-centered in the process. So yes, it is an important cog, but it's a piece. It's a very, very important piece, but it is that one aspect. And you have to get people who are doing learning experience design to actually be able to talk to and work with, for example, software engineers, and to be able to talk with them and have those conversations to build better products and better solutions. And that's just two examples of people who may be on a team. There actually would be a lot more. And for jobs, sure, I hope there are jobs out there for them because we need them.
Rod, Danielle?
I'll just say that I think it's, again, the how is that learning experience design unfolding? Because you can read and you can have lots of theories and you can say, well, here is how humans learn. Here's how humans are supported in learning. And therefore, I'm going to build X, Y, and Z into this learning design experience. I'm going to have thought-provoking questions. I'm going to have space practice, and so on. So you can have a very theory-driven process that will probably help. But you can also learning engineer the learning experience design. So the way you create the learning experience, the way you design could be important or different. It could start maybe at different points or bring in different perspectives. So I don't see them as competing. I do think that they are linked. I don't know if I would put one subservient to the other, but again, thinking about how do we design this experience? What data do we gather? Whose voices do we hear to produce this output?
So I want to introduce another element here, which is that you're starting an academic program, which I think is very exciting. And Janet Kolodner, who was part of the earlier episode, does have an academic program at Boston College, but they're very, very few in the area. And it's great to see that starting to happen. And if we step back and just talk about science and engineering, engineering has emerged as a distinct area from science that cuts across many fields at universities. So you have chemical engineering, and you have bioengineering, and software engineering, and that is part of computer science, but it's not subsumed within computer science. It complements computer science. I think one of the examples we've used at Icicle is that you can be a genius at physics, and that doesn't mean that you know how to build a bridge. And that, in fact, to build a bridge, you not only need physics, but you need metallurgy, and you need an understanding of geology, and you need all of these interdisciplinary things that don't come in when you're doing pure physics, and that have value in the world of actually making things happen as opposed to developing powerful theories. But I'm wondering what it's like to start a new area at ASU. We've had many people from ASU on this program because it is such an innovative place. And of course, in a way, coming out of Harvard, I'm coming out at the polar opposite, because I would imagine at ASU, if you say, I've got this great idea for a new program, people probably say, wow, tell me about it. I can tell you at Harvard, if you say, I've got a great idea for this new program, they would say, well, we're number one without it. So, why on earth would you want to bother? But I'm curious about not only how it has gone in terms of creating this space within ASU, but also any advice that you might have for people who are excited about this concept and thinking, gee, I'd like to have a learning engineering program, or I'd like to have a new program in this new emerging area that I think is important. Well, any advice that you've got about navigating the academic shoals?
I'll jump in very quickly with just well, actually what Danielle's just pulled up right now. At ASU, the charter is so crucial and so important. And so uniquely here, if you come up with a good idea that will serve the charter, there's enthusiasm for it. So if we're already number one, how can we be like number one-er, like more number one, as long as we're serving the charter? But Danielle's pulled this up. I'll let her continue.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that brings everyone at ASU together is the charter. And so there's just this strong belief and strong stronghold on what we are here to do. And it involves inclusive excellence. So measuring our success by who we include and not by who we exclude. And advancing research and discovery of public value. So thinking about what kinds of research will contribute to betterment of the economy, the community we serve, social, cultural, and overall health of the community that we serve. And the Learning Engineering Institute is intricately tied to that. It's intricately tied to inclusive excellence. It is intricately tied to the health of our students, to betterment of their learning experience, their learning outcomes, both while they're here and afterwards. And so that's why it's really not hard to get people on board. People are excited at ASU to join this endeavor, and they've been hungry for it. The Learning Engineering Institute provides a forum to bring people together from different parts of the university, from cross sectors, because we have I can't even begin to describe how big ASU is. It is so huge. One of the really joys of this new job that I've taken on is discovering everything that's happening across this university. But people are also hungry to know what other people are doing, and the Learning Engineering Institute provides that forum. I think as we move along, we're going to try to learn as we go. We're building the plane as we're flying it, and so we will work toward helping others to do the same. But I guess, my first line of advice would be this chart. Think about what your goal is as a learning institution, as whatever you're doing. Think about, and maybe this goes back to the philosophy. This is our philosophy. This is our charter. This is what guides us.
Kurt, you want to ask
Yes,
your
so,
second question?
I'm sorry, I just saw Kurt want me to go first, and so thanks, Chris. So I have another question. I'm really curious. Like Chris was again talking about, if this were an academic program. Do you remember in the 1990s when the Learning Science PhD program was built in Northwestern? That was 92 or 93, or a long time ago, right? Remember that time? And they have, they were running huge experiments in the suburbs of Chicago. They had a bunch of students who come out, and I've worked with some of them, all those things. So if I were a new student wants to come to study in yours, it looks like you are going to graduate PhDs, probably. Okay, so PhDs in learning engineering, and you're going to produce learning engineers in the future. Like when Kurt was talking about, the father is not engineer, but a real engineer. And I was also, I think I mentioned this, I used to be on the advisory board for Disney Junior. They have those Imagineers on campus. So they have the Imagineers, imagination engineers designing, right? In Disneyland. They had a beautiful, a lot of like 3D, animation, all those things allow you to do that. So I was just wondering, this learning engineer, the main expertise will be what? Because you have experts from different disciplines. And from your description, learning engineering is really bringing experts from different fields to work together, so you got all these different experts. So but now you have a learning engineer, the first learning engineer with a PhD out of ASU will be doing what? Like coordination, understanding everything, but not in depth of anything. So what would that person be if that's the plan to drive the whole thing?
Before we answer, I really want to give kudos to Scotty, because when we came into this, we had this, I had this goal of having a certificate, but I really thought it would take us quite a lot more time than it did but Scotty just really, he got it done. And it's been reviewed, all the forms have been submitted, we're on the second phase. So what is the flavor of this and what's our dream? It goes back to your question of what is a learning engineer and what are the different, what does a learning engineer do? Well, the way our certificate will work is that if you have you're getting a degree in educational technologies, you can get a certificate in learning engineering that provides you with experience in engaging in the learning engineering process with other students from other disciplines and actually working on learning engineering projects and learning about what that process is and what the philosophy is of learning engineering. And so Scotty is teaching one of the core courses for this program. And the toolkit, the learning engineering toolkit, is just fundamental to being able to convey this process. When I'm talking to people across the university, I often recommend this book, and it's people are really grasp onto it because it conveys something that brings people together in a collaborative process. So Scotty, you want to talk more about the program and what we envision for future?
Yes, I kind of want to start out again. Danielle's already pushed back on this some, but I want to start out by saying that you've kind of misrepresented what we're doing in training and I apologize if we gave you that misconception. Because learning engineering is a process. So will we be training learning engineers? I think we'll be training people who are confident in calling themselves learning engineers, but learning engineers, and they'll have their own special focus. That's why we're starting out with this certificate, because what you want to be able to do is make sure that people are well trained in the process. They know how to talk to, and they get used to talking to other people who are going through the learning engineering process from different areas. And that's what the certificate is set up to do. So people can come from any area, discipline in the university or even outside, because you can actually get our certificate without being enrolled in any other area. So anybody who is a professional out there who's actually working and they are not going to enroll in another degree, they can actually get the certificate separately and actually get some credentials. But within the university, you can come from psychology if you're interested in learning and learning engineer, and you can actually get those basic foundations. Computer science, software engineering, learning sciences, or learning science even. And you can get this added on as an added bonus kind of to your training. Now, next steps could be a master's degree similar to what Boston College has, or also similar to the metals program that CMU has. But again, there we will be training people in the basics of what learning engineering is, and they could still go on for a PhD. They might go on for a PhD in a primary discipline. So they might get a PhD in psychology and have that learning engineering basic training from their masters, or even maybe human systems engineering, which is my program. As the graduate chair, I have to push that also. So I just wanted to kind of push back on the fact that like we are training people to be just learning engineers. Now, as we form as a discipline later, I won't say that maybe we will start training people as learning engineers, but the area is not there yet. I think we need to coalesce more, but right now we have to focus on the process and training people on that process.
Kurt, I'm sorry, I just want to add. So Scotty, so in essence, from what, thanks for the pushback. I think our listeners would really love those things because right now, for me, I think Chris understands a lot more about this learning engineering than I do. So when we do this shows, we want people to understand. So let me just ask another follow-up question, which really means that, is it that you do not desire to produce a PhD in learning engineering, or is it that the discipline is not mature enough to have enough content to support a person to become a PhD in learning engineering? Or is it because of both? Or is it, so I'm just ready to say, could there be someone specialized just without other disciplines? I am a learning engineer, basically. Not the certificate, but really as trained as a discipline.
So I don't know, Danielle, if you want to take that, or do you want?
Well, one of the things you were asking about cued me to something that Chris said just earlier. And it has to do with the different types of disciplinary knowledge you need in order to engage in this kind of research. So one approach is to yourself be multidisciplinary. I, for example, have training in linguistics and psychology and computer science and educational research, and been doing research in writing and reading, and have developed technology systems and done basic research and learning analytics. And so the question is, does everyone who does this kind of research have to have all of that kind of multidisciplinary research, or is it a process where you bring together collaborative teams? And do you need to know how to put those teams together and recognize when that process is and is not effective? Another question about this is the extent to which does a learning engineer have to have experience in data analytics? So the extent to which instrumentation and learning analytics, are those the crucial element? Or, as noted earlier by Kurt, is it the learning experience design? Is that the critical thing? Or is it the learning sciences? Is that the critical thing? So we could imagine a program where for a PhD, you have to have a good amount of training and expertise in all four of the major components that go into the solving problems in learning engineering. Our starting point, however, is to leverage all of the wonderful programs that already exist and add on to them rather than replace them. So rather than being redundant with a PhD in particular areas that go into and feed into and inform learning engineering, working with them so that we can work on the process. So your fundamental question is, can you get a PhD in learning engineering, right? And I think the fundamental answer I have is, I don't know yet. We're going to start with the certificates. Then we'll consider a master's degree, and then we'll move from there as to, is that what we need? Because we're not going to produce PhDs just to say that we have PhDs. Does the field need people with PhDs in learning engineer in order to solve learning problems? And I think that's the question to ask, not can we increase our reputation by having a PhD in learning engineering?
So this is really, by the way, a great fun conversation. I should come out to the very hot Phoenix to do this. I was there several years ago before COVID with Punya, but the reason I kept asking this is because this is such a new thing, and you will get people having different questions. And also, as I said before, once you reach certain age, you began to question the survivability of new ideas, right? I mean, like you said, when this came in, when will it disappear, and what's the next step? So thank you, guys. I know Kurt has another question, but thanks.
I think our show needs some cage matches. And really, we talked about that early on in our episodes, that we need to have a little more debate and conflict here. So it's quite enlightening for me to listen to all of you. We do have a comment from a listener who's watching us right now in our YouTube channel, along with my friend Dodzi, but Lydia's sitting there, and she says, it seems engineering and learning engineering embodies pragmatism, allowing us to examine a problem through multiple lenses depending upon the context. So I just thought I'd put that out there for other people who are listening. Please come next week, a week after, and attend these live sessions in YouTube and ask questions like Lydia and Dodzi and others always do. My comment, and the reason I delayed a bit is because it's going to take us in a different direction. In part, I wanted us to look back, and in part, giving what Young just said, I want us to look forward to what might exist later on. But I always take a few minutes before the show, or maybe a couple days before the show, and I look at the bios of the people coming in. And Danielle's, yours particularly caught my attention because of the note about working on essay writing and the writing PAL, and comprehension writing and natural language processing, and Scotty with multimedia, and Rod with scaffolded instruction, and to foster metacognitive elements and cognitive as well. Back 35 years ago, Gabriel Solomon was working on the writing and reading partners. He told me it didn't have much funding to build. I think he said it's held together by rubber bands, and so I guess people are incarcerated people he had hired to build it, or something to that effect when I wrote to him. But he's trying to enhance metacognition of learners as they went about their writing endeavors, and reading and writing both. And so I built a system within WordPerfect for reflective writing, a computer prompting program for generative and evaluative thinking, as well as a keystroke mapping program. But I never went further and built the whole darn system. But then later on, I was working on Wikibooks and other things. And today we're looking at ChatGPT for language learning. And I'm now wondering about, given your histories and looking back, and I'm kind of curious what this writing PAL was all about. I'd like Danielle to start and explain what that was, but don't spend too much time on that. I want you to think about, what this new evolution. I mean, I think Scotty's particularly interested in Rod too, in emerging technologies for learning. What this new generation of learning technology is enabling us to do that might foster metacognitive skills and take what we've learned in the past couple of decades and superpower it somehow, enhance it. And so what do you see? What has you interested? What are you writing grants about in particular? What components or what aspects of generative AI particularly enthuse you right now? And what do you hope might happen a decade from now if you were to build such a writing system? Then what might be able to build then? And to engineer then what might happen? Just wondering. But first, reflect back, Danielle.
Wow, Kurt, that's like quite a question. Given everything that we're doing now, we are doing multiple projects in this realm. We have a leap on generative AI to tackle the development of resources for faculty so that they can embrace generative AI. And I think it has a lot of promise for helping students to engage in critical thinking, critical evaluation. It has a lot of promise also for writing and helping students to learn critical thinking during writing. It also compromises, of course, many aspects of writing. And so how to leverage it without compromising helping students to learn writing strategies and knowledge about writing is critical. And that's the critical part of Writing Pal. So Writing Pal is a tutoring system that provides students with practice and instruction on writing strategies. So the fundamental assumption of the Writing Pal was that students gain by learning writing strategies, and in order to kind of catch up to those peers who have had more practice in writing. And that also can come together in writing the essays, which incorporate these writing strategies within the feedback. And I'll note that Rod has been a fundamental collaborator on this research from the very beginning, since he joined our team in Memphis in 2008. And so right now, where are we with the Writing Pal? We've been developing the writing analytics tool for the last 4 years, which is a tool that provides researchers and teachers and students with analytics about writing. I view this as being helpful, particularly from an instructional point of view. So my objective over the next couple of years is to incorporate writing analytics so that instructors have more information about writing products. So that's on the instructor side. How do we facilitate grading? How do we facilitate the instructor? How do we facilitate or enhance writing? I think that that's where we can particularly turn to generative AI and providing human-centered feedback on writing while students are writing. I really think that the current technologies open the door for writing at scale at a university like ASU, where we can provide these kinds of technologies to disciplines other than just the English language arts disciplines. So I think it's just an open door, like the world is our oyster right now. Right now, the three of us are writing a proposal because we want to incorporate generative learning activities that are driven by generative AI and large language models into at scale. So at a place like ASU, where students will have more ready access to these kinds of activities. But that's an hour-long talk.
Well, I'm going to invite you to my class this fall. There'll be a follow-up email. I'm teaching learning environment design, so we'll talk. Scotty or Rod, do you want to take a stab at any aspect of that question or questions?
I'll just add on to the writing analytics tool, sort of like where we're going. One of the strengths of that project is that bit of a departure is that it's not just about assessment, where we're trying to put scores on things, that we actually have purely descriptive analytics so that a student or an instructor can say, here is what my writing looks like. It is more cohesive, but not to say cohesion is good or bad, but this is a property of your writing. What were you trying to achieve? Were you trying to be cohesive? Is that what the writing assignment called for? What are the ways you can achieve this? What are the different ways you can achieve it? And that sort of dovetails with the way I think about educational technology in the future is how can it be agentic? There are so many tools out there really thinking about what are students wanting to do? What are their life goals? And then how does the technology serve that goal, open up new tools for them to use and so forth, which is a little bit different usually than like, we know best, use this tool because it's good for you. It's broccoli, you should eat your broccoli. And instead thinking like, what is it that you want in life? And how can I help you get there? By the way, here's a tool that might help you with your writing.
We probably have time for 1 minute for Scotty before Chris does a summary and then I introduce the next show. So real quick, 30 seconds or a minute, Scotty?
Oh, I'm never good with 30 seconds to a minute. But I will say very quickly, just to kind of sum things up, it's one thing to remember when you're dealing with new technology, especially with things like generative AI. Human learning has not fundamentally changed. The technology has changed. And you need to make sure that you fully understand how that technology is going to work before we fully implement it. Because if we just throw it into the environment, it's not going to help people. You have to understand the human needs, how they are going to use it, how it's going to help facilitate them, and understand that full process, and not just throw it in and over-rely, over-trust that it's going to solve the problem. Because inevitably what we've seen time after time again with technology, when we do that, it fails and it doesn't meet expectations because a technology is a technology. That being said, that doesn't mean don't use generative AI, but find useful ways to use it.
So I just want to close by thanking you both for being on the episode, but also for helping this field to evolve and to find an academic base. One of the persistent themes on Silver Lining for Learning has been the lack of scale in education, that we keep developing little islands of innovation that come and go, and we never somehow find the way to get things that deserve scale to go to scale. And I think that engineering is a process that fits very well with scale. And I hope that we will build up the capacity of the field to do that. So I thank you again for coming. Kurt, you want to talk about next week?
So next week is episode 163 of Silver Lining for Learning, Contemporary Education and the Changing Culture in Ukraine. At 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we'll hear from Hannah Bondarenko from the Institute for International Education at VN Karzan Kharkiv National University. So she's in Kharkiv, which was on the front lines there early in the war. And she's got many interesting things to tell us about education. She'll start with a little PowerPoint about education in Ukraine. She's a visiting fellow at Indiana University right now, but located in Ukraine, actually. And so it'll be a fascinating episode. We've been trying for half a year to get someone from, maybe a year to get someone from Ukraine. So it's great we finally have someone next week. It's been a great show today. See you next time.